Welcome back, everyone, to another enriching episode of Business, Bourbon, and Cigars, where we're going to bring you insights, strategies, and stories so you can fuel your business growth journey. I'm your host, Scott Joseph, and today we have the pleasure of diving deep into the world of business process optimization with an exceptional guest, Samuel Drauschak. So Sam, he's the co-founder, he's the chief process scientist of Truvle. He's a visionary when it comes to the world of business efficiency and innovation, two things that cut close here. And I've got some good stories to fill you in on my journey where what he's going to teach you will help exponentially grow your business. He's got a wealth of experience in management, consulting, and he's on a mission to simplify and enhance operations across all industries. Sam's here to share his expertise with us. He's going to provide a lot of insights. And when you walk away from this episode, we want you to have a better understanding of what it's going to take to scale, automate, and grow your business. So Sam, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. So let's start right away. It's an honor, first off, to have you here. As I brought up in the intro, I've went through the trial and errors of before process and after process. So I'm excited. I was excited to have you on as a guest because I think you're going to help literally every single person in our audience today. But start off sharing a little bit about your journey and, how did you become so deeply immersed in this business optimization processing?
Absolutely. Yeah, for me, I fell into the career space mostly by accident. So by university study, I was a student of the sciences. So I studied biology, chemistry, psychology, and there's a lot of process that you learn when you learn science, but it wasn't something that I really realized at the time that I would take to so much. It wasn't until I got early in my career, I decided not to be a doctor, sort of at the last minute. And I just went out into industry and I figured out what I could do. And I got introduced early on to Lean, Six Sigma, some of the more classic process improvement methodologies. And I loved it. It just really fit with my mind. It fit with my scientific background. And there was so much history there, but also so much room for improvement. So for me, it was a really exciting space to delve more into, not only in my career, but also academically, writing, speaking. It's been such a robust space. And especially now that everything is digitizing and process is becoming much more complex, there's such a huge need for people to really be pioneers in this space. And that's really the short bit of it. I just fell in love with it just by getting introduced early and really digging in. And it's been a fantastic journey so far.
So you've got a book, Becoming a Conscious Business. What inspired you to write it? And then more importantly, what are the readers going to get from it?
Sure. So if readers, what they're going to get from it might be a mixed bag because let me start with why I wrote it. I wrote it because I was studying process. I was working in process. I was applying things to my personal life and my brain and my body was on overload. And I thought I really need to get all of these concepts that I'm seeing and I'm experiencing on paper and try to organize them and sort through them. So really this book was meant to be an expression of my own journey and my own insight and discovery in the process space and how it really impacted my life personally and professionally in a very profound way. So if you pick up the book and you want to read it, the idea that you will pick up a lot of new stuff from just my musings, my own understandings, my own life journey. And that's really what it's about. It's my discovery of process science.
You know what I think will help our audience the most from this show? I don't care if you give them, and I say this, obviously I care. I was going to say, I don't care if you give them any insights or tips that are specific. All right. I know we're going to, so calm down, everybody. But the number one thing I hope they get out of this is that they recognize while they think they have processes, they don't have it the way it should be. And what I mean by that is I'm blown away by how many business leaders I talk to when we're talking about a process. It doesn't matter if it's onboarding somebody, a process in manufacturing, whatever it might be. Doesn't matter. Could be operational. It doesn't matter. And then you say, well, let me see your process. And they can't even produce it. It's all here in their head, right? There's no written true process. So if anybody gets anything from this, they need to start documenting their processes because you really don't have one until that's done. I mean, do you see that?
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, absolutely, it's the case. And the one little thing on the end you said is they don't have a process until they document it. They have it. You always have it. That's the critical foundation, right? Which is that they're always there. Everything is happening around you. Could be described in process terms. It's you don't command it if you don't write it down. Yeah. If you are not able to understand it well enough to document it or explain it or communicate to someone else, then you're not able to manage it. You won't be able to manage your process. And I think that's the critical part.
You know, we during some of our leadership, our business bourbon and cigar leadership retreats, we've got a great guy that gets up and after we get through some of the mastermind breakout sessions, he does a great job listening to the panel discussion and the table leaders talk about their ideas and their improvements and this and that. And ultimately, at some point, we talk process. All right, because first off, you're supposed to lay out an action step in a kind of a rough draft of what this process, this new idea would look like. And we get on and people don't think about this, but process to me can touch every part of your business, right? And so let's just take sales. He goes, if you've got 30 salespeople, 10 salespeople, doesn't matter how many it is. If you don't have a process that everyone can follow, if you've got 30 salespeople, you've got 30 processes. And the problem with that is you can't manage or lead 30 processes. You can manage or lead one. Doesn't mean everybody's got to be a robot and do everything, and especially in sales, say it exactly the same way and this and that. But there has to be a process of non-negotiables that everybody follows. And I thought that was a good point. But let's talk a little bit. Let's get into some more specifics so you can the audience learns as much as possible from you. One of your areas of expertise is process mapping. So why do you believe businesses should invest in process mapping? And then how does that take them from here? How does that help them level up and improve their success?
Sure. And we already basically mentioned it, which is that the reality of business today is most people don't understand their own processes, which I think is a very hard thing to create self-awareness of initially. But the basic, the foundation of being able to command and manage your processes, improve them, monitor them, control them, all the things that we want to do good business, that foundation is being able to document them accurately and consistently. So process mapping is the recommended medium to do that. If you think about all the data, let's call it process data that could describe your business, you could capture it in a lot of different ways. You could do it in Word, you could do it in Excel, you could do videos like on Loom. A lot of people are trying to express their process data in different ways. But process mapping is the most efficient way to document what is a very complex data set. So if you build that muscle to your question of what does it do for my business, it gives you a lot of clarity. And that clarity and knowledge is something that you might not even know you don't have, but it helps power better decision-making. It powers all your efforts. It helps you analyze. It helps you strategize. Without good process data, it's really hard to do anything effectively.
So for the people, if there's a lot of businesses that aren't actually documenting their processes, and I would venture to say there's a decent amount of entrepreneurs out there that probably don't don't run their businesses strictly on data. Define process mapping for them. I probably should have asked you that first.
No, it's actually a great question. For those who aren't familiar at all, a process map is a visualization of process data in a way that's easy for somebody to understand. And typically what that looks like, if I took it on a whiteboard, it's just boxes, it's just squares and diamonds typically. And that are just connected by lines with arrows. So in the most rudimentary sense, it's telling a story of an operating reality, a scope of some sort of operating reality in pictures, because pictures are truly worth 1,000 words in the space. It's much easier to consume data through pictures and images than if I told you, I'm going to write a process about making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You could either read it in a 3-page Word document, or you can look at it in a picture of steps and decisions. Yeah. The latter is a process map. And that's really what we're looking for so that we can more effectively communicate process information.
Would you say most people are visual and that impacts them more? Yes. Let's say all I did was have a manual of all my processes written out and let's say I simplified it, right? Let's say I was able to take every process and get it down to one page. Here's our process for this. So they didn't have to go through pages and pages on how to do something.
Yeah.
Would you say what you just said, the process mapping is still much more effective than the prior?
Yes, unequivocally. And part of the reason for that is reading things in documents is a restrictive medium because processes are happening in real time, and they happen. Let's say if you have a yes or no decision, and at one time it's yes and one time it's no. When you're looking at a process and you're thinking about it visually, all those different branches of process are happening usually simultaneously in your business all day long. It's very hard to understand the timing and the entire picture through any sort of long form documentation. It's just not as easy. It's not an accurate medium. So even if you think, oh, I'd prefer to read it or I'd prefer to watch it, honestly, in all of our work in the field, people's minds are keyed in to understand this information better through pictures.
So I'm not an expert when it comes to process. I understand it conceptually. I feel like I understand it very well conceptually, just enough to do damage. If I actually had to do it, I'm not like you where I could actually go in and just nail it down. And so it's funny when you talk a lot about process science. So that, as much as my knowledge I think I have no idea. What do you mean by that?
Sure. So process, like you just said, there's people who work on process. And let's say there's a lot of consultants are primarily out there working on process work because it's seen as a complicated skill set. And if I hire 10 consultants and I say, analyze this process, draw this process, give me your findings, you're likely going to have 10 different diagrams and 10 different sets of findings that may or may not overlap at all. That is anecdotal, experiential. That's non-scientific. That's really people who are going in with their experience and they form an opinion, and that may or may not be the right opinion. When you get down to process science, the science edition is really to say that the methods and the way that we take in the process data and the way that we analyze it should be replicable and create consistent results. So if I had 10 process scientists instead of just your run-of-the-mill consultant, they would go in and they would look at a process subject. They should be analyzing it the same way and coming up with similar results, even if it was in different contexts or they did it independently of each other. So at a high level, that's really the difference of what makes a domain of expertise just something that people are practicing versus scientific. It's really this idea that you have this commitment to the rigor of method and the rigor of data handling and management so that it can become something that people can share and it can grow on itself. And that's really what we're trying to do, more with that process scientist angle versus just, hey, I'm a process consultant or I'm a process expert.
What kind of data is a scientist looking at? What are the non-negotiables for them that they have to have accurately to be able to start to do this?
So the biggest thing is accuracy is a big one, but accuracy is not even necessarily needed for science. It's actually just the same perspective that's needed in the same angle. So for instance, if I had a microscope and it was at 10x or 100x or 1000x magnification, science can happen if everyone is at 10x, because then you know that a colleague across the world is looking at the same thing at the same detail level, the same resolution, and you can have a discussion about it. It doesn't matter if 10x was even the right one. It's just we have to be able to talk the same language. Process is a very interesting thing because, like I mentioned, if I told somebody to look at a process and describe it to me, there is no fixed detail level. People are just going to use their intuition and pick any sort of resolution they want, and that makes it very hard to compare data. So the most important thing right now in this space is the data has to be collected at the same detail level in roughly the same way so that that data can become comparable and we can work together to analyze it and build a database that makes sense and we can get more insight from. So the accuracy part is something that I hope evolves in this space. But initially, and we're still struggling in the entire market with this, is let's get process data captured and structured the same way so we can talk about that data. Because right now we're reinventing the wheel every time anyone writes any process data down.
You tend to use a lot of different phrases, words, process science, things like that, that I think a lot of our audience, even the ones that are good at developing good processes, process management and things like that, may not know. So I want to get those kind of out of the way. That's why I'm asking you some of this process science. So let's talk energy flow. Yep. First off, that's another one. So what the heck do you mean by energy flow? And then how does energy flow relate to process optimization?
Sure. So when we talk about process science, I kind of gave what it is practically, but at the highest level, process science is the study of change at its broadest level, because our reality that we live in is just systems in constant motion. That's what makes our life complicated. So when you look at how you take this scientifically, when you're studying processes, you're just studying systems in motion. And what starts that motion? It's energy of some kind. So energy is also at the very highest level of what powers a process. And to make that more practical, energy in business is typically going to be labor and capital, just to make it more tangible. So if I'm talking about how energy flows through a business process, I'm really looking at what is the speed in which a process system can consume labor, human labor, and capital, because that's what we're trying to do. And when you look at flow, think about water flowing through a pipe. If I'm putting water at the top of a pipe and I want to see it flowing, the result I want is it coming out of the end of the pipe. You could say, okay, there's water coming out of this pipe. It's a success. But in business, you're actually looking at flow, because you want more to come out faster. You want more velocity. You want more volume. And how do you do that? Well, you have to be able to clean the pipe. You have to understand what's happening throughout the entire system. So when you're talking about energy flow and process, you're talking about, how do I get energy to flow more efficiently through the system at a higher velocity with less friction? Because that's how you're going to get more outputs from processes. So hopefully that helps conceptualize that at a high level.
Well, when you're saying that, I visualize a gutter, right? Okay, So here I've got my gutter and I got the drain. All right. So, and then what I'm thinking about, because I've said this before to people, you want to, if you're not one of those companies or people that are continuously trying to improve your processes, which I'm going to assume, and I agree with, I'm going to assume you think they should always be doing that.
It's your number one strategic priority.
And I think every good business leader would agree with that. It doesn't mean they all do it, even if they agree with it. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But it's easy to think your gutter and drainage system in your house is working great when there's not a lot of rain. All right. Oh, yeah, it's flowing. Look at that. When you get that storm, all right, and I equate this to, if you want to really, the best way for a business to improve their processes, to really know what they've got, sell more. You start selling more and start breaking the process, breaking the system, and all of a sudden you realize, and we'll get into that when we get into scalability and stuff like that. Man, you put pressure on that process, watch your brain work then, because you don't want clients being, you don't want them having a bad experience. You don't want unsatisfied. You don't want to lose them. You don't want to lose key employees. I can tell you the only reason I got into all of this, I don't want to say too early, but I mean, looking back now, it's early because I've been in business a while. But, you know, the first 9 years I was in business, no process at all. I had processes, like you said, none documented. I had no idea about efficiency. I threw people at the problem. All right. And you know what happens when you throw people at the problem? In my case, I still only had one or two people that were really good. So what ends up happening is all the work I really counted on to make sure that my customers were treated right and things got done on time, and didn't miss deadlines, kept getting pushed to the same one or two people. And eventually what happened, because they were so loyal and they were very good people to work with, some of these people were working till literally 2, 3 in the morning to get their job done. They did what it took to get their job done. And I realized I'm killing these people. This is awful. There's no amount of money you can pay someone like that to justify that work-life balance. It doesn't make sense to them. And so I was fortunate that I knew someone that was an expert. All right. This is 15, 20 years ago, an expert at process improvement. In fact, he ran a manufacturing plant, and they would hire a company from Japan to come over and teach them the Kaizen process. All right. They would only work with this guy when they came over. that was the guy, because he accomplished things. He got things done. I mean, he's root cause and he's barrier boarding. He's stop watching all the activities. And he spent an entire day or two. If we worked on a process in our company, he'd spend an entire day timing the actual activities, doing all this stuff. And I'm assuming that goes into that science part because it's data, right? I don't know. You'll have to clarify. But, at first our people were like, that works in manufacturing. That doesn't work in business operations, administrative type stuff. And, it didn't take long for him to prove that wrong. And he was one piece flow type stuff. And I'm just throwing out all this stuff. But all of a sudden I didn't have to keep hiring people to fix my issues. My client experience was better because people were getting things in a more timely and predictive manner. More importantly, equally importantly, my employees were much happier. And it was easier to manage and lead people and actually train and onboard people when all this stuff started getting documented, and we stopped repeating the same mistakes over and over because he was root causing them, right? And we were fixing the reason they were happening, not just fixing the problem. And so, what steps, I guess my question to you is, so that's my story. That's why I'm so passionate about this. That's why I love having you on here. What steps can a business take to ensure optimal energy flow within their organizations?
Sure. And a lot of the story you just told is the core of what it's all about, which is understanding your processes well enough to analyze them so you can make educated decisions. And in the case that you brought up, you hired a process expert who measured your process first. Yep. That's the discipline that a lot of process work, where most people falter, is that they're focused on the problems, they're focused on solutions, they're focused on what do I need to do the things that I want. Nobody wants to take the time to study what's going on now. How does my business work now? Everyone is always trying to skip that step. So if you're talking about what are the steps to achieve those incredible results that you're describing, it always starts with baselining your business as it's working today. Because even if you don't think it's working well, it's working. It's providing some value to customers. People are coming. Even if, like you said, there's 2 out of 10 employees that are activated, like in a small group, there's still flow happening. And you always need to take the time to baseline that flow first, because if you don't know where you are, it's going to be very hard to iterate or change or solve the problems. Right. So in general, if you want to explain process improvement at a super high level, it's always baseline your processes, write them down, look at them first. Confirm that the problems you think you have are the problems that are there and that you need to be solving, and then do process analysis and really try to get the measures, really understand the problem thoroughly, then process design, then implementation. And obviously that's at a very high level and making it simple, but hopefully that puts the steps in order. And you can never skip step 1. If there's anything you can take away, don't skip step 1.
Yeah, I wrote that down actually. I because I think that applies to so many things. So, all right. So you mentioned a lot about process is everything. Yeah. All right. So explain why it's essential for business leaders in just plain 5th to 8th grade level. All right. Why business leaders need to adopt a process-centric mindset.
Sure. Well, and the whole process of everything, and we've teased it already in some of our previous conversation, which is that there is no such thing as no process. There can be no documented process. There can be no understanding of the process. But even if you have a group of people that do it differently every day and every time, it's just a chaotic ad hoc process that's happening. So we've got to adopt this mindset, because there is no such thing as no process. Your business is always going to be a collection of processes that can be described, analyzed, managed in process terms. So for a business owner to say, well, I don't need process tool set, I don't need to understand these process methods, it's like basically saying, I don't need to fundamentally understand my business, and I'm just going to run my business by guess and check as long as I can, which is just it's not a smart strategy. And if you want to leverage all the exciting innovations, technologically speaking, especially happening right now, you've got to have better tools and better fundamentals. And if you want to scale, automate, grow, all the things we want, it all starts with process. There's no way to avoid it.
When it comes to leaders, what do you think the most valuable skills are that they need to have? I just feel like the market and business world's changing so fast. So to me, for you, I guess what I'm asking is, what skills do they need more than any other?
Sure. I definitely think the biggest skill that they need is empathy first. I think we're still a world that's driven by people. And I think we're not there yet where you can just ignore your people. And if your people aren't happy, they're not working a correct amount of hours. There's so many companies and technologies out there that make them more aware that they're unhappy. And it's becoming a problem that as leaders, we really cannot ignore. We have to make sure our people are happy first. And after that, I think it's a data-driven mindset. And that's not just process data. That's just, if you're a leader, it's not sufficient anymore to be a leader who just goes with their gut. Not in this world and not in this digital world. You've got to be somebody who, whatever this means to you, start small. You have to lead with data. Data has to come first. Because if you can't be a leader that uses data and makes data-driven and evidence-based decisions, scientific decisions, you're going to have a really hard time being consistent and making your people happy and activating your business.
You bring up data-driven. It makes me laugh because if my wife and I have discussions at home and I'm saying, we need to do this, we need to do this, why are we doing it this way, whatever, and I said, listen, we are a data-driven household. That doesn't go over well.
I was going to say.
It doesn't go over well. But how significant is AI as it relates today? And then how are you incorporating that in? How can it help? And also, what's the potential downfall with it in terms of, I don't want to say downfall, but negatives to it?
Yeah. So AI... and I'm going to give a more boring answer than maybe some futurists would say. It's just the latest form of automation in a long line of automated solutions that have come out since software. So you could say software, big data, robotics, basic automation, and now artificial intelligence-based automation. The real thing here is there's not the only downside. I'll start with the downsides. The only downsides of artificial intelligence is if you try to put it in your business and you don't have the skills to actually integrate it properly, and it becomes another bad solution for you that just causes more chaos and more waste. That's the downside of artificial intelligence, but it's the downside of all automation opportunities that are not taken properly. I think the good parts of AI is the same thing that we've been dealing with for now several decades, which is all forms of automation are going to help your business if you deploy them and you integrate them appropriately. And that's the key. And how do you do that? You have to understand how to go through the basic project steps, because I can tell you right now, AI is not going to replace half your staff tomorrow. Your staff, even the most line staff with sort of the most basic capabilities in your company, they make complex decisions. They have complex processes they manage. If you underestimate that, you're going to put an AI in there and you're going to cause a lot of problems. So I would say AI represents a great opportunity as far as you have the business and process maturity to embrace that opportunity and harness it. And it's been that way for all the solutions that have come out recently.
That's a great way to put it. Let's dive into and start talking about the distinctions between whether it's scaling, automation, and growth. So break down these concepts, right? So I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there, especially the ones early on, they achieve certain levels of success. Maybe it's just out of they had a good idea, they work very hard, right? And they get it to here. But I think there's a lot of them that really struggle taking it from here to the next plateau and above. And for a while there, you can put me in that category. I will say when we brought on our process person, those first 10 years, we were growing. It's easy to grow from zero. So you're growing, right? And we start doing very well and we're successful. But what launched us into a whole different level where we're dealing with not just the people that are working, let's say, with the B2C, the direct consumer, but now we're working with manufacturers. And I mean, Shell Oil would be a client. I mean, we're dealing with big clients, right? That doesn't happen without the right processes. And so when our process improvement and really understanding and documenting was one of the steps that we took that I can point to that said that was one of the catalysts that vaulted us. But let's break this down. Let's talk a lot about scaling, automation, growth.
Sure.
Explain how they intersect and complement each other.
Yep, absolutely. Be happy to. So I'll start at the high level relationships. Business growth, let's say it this way. Sustainable business growth is powered by sustainable scaling efforts. And sustainable scaling efforts is powered by sustainable automation.
Yep.
And I'm using the word sustainable. It's kind of a mouthful because you can do all these things in one moment in time. But if you don't do them correctly, you're going to have maybe like a blip and then you're going to fall backwards. And that's not how any of these work. But the idea basically behind growth is the sort of permanent, sustainable acquisition of more revenue for your business. So the easy way to say that is you've got more customers who are demanding your product, and you expect that customer demand to stay going upward and an upward trajectory. And that could be because you have good reviews, you're building a good reputation, more people are finding you, your marketing efforts are successful, whatever it is. And just because you have 10 customers today and 20 tomorrow are outside your shop, it doesn't mean that you can actually serve all 20 because you might not have the capability or the capacity. Those are the two things. Now we're moving on to scaling. So when you feel like the growth is there or it's at your door or you're able to get it, you have to take whatever capacity you have now and you have to build more of it. And that's what scaling means, the technical definition of scaling, which is I'm building more capacity in my process. And it could be the same capabilities or it could be more. And what I mean by that is, let's say if you're building cars, right? If I'm building 10 cars with my current set of machines today, and I just want to do the same car building, the same capability, I just need 10 more machines, let's say, to build 10 more of them. And then there's economies of scale and things like that. And that's a bigger issue. The one note I'll say when we're just talking definitions about scaling is exponentially harder as you get bigger, because as you become a bigger system, there's just more places for it to break. So this is not a linear thing, which is why you can scale in a sustainable way or an unsustainable way. And sometimes it's not just one-to-one. Okay, I have more demand, I need more machines. And then what we talk about automation, the only way to truly scale properly is by leveraging automation. You can't build more capacity in your systems infinitely unless you're building the bigger capacity at a lower and lower cost. Because like I said, if you scale your capacity up, it's going to become more complex. Every 10 machines you add to a factory, and I'm just using factory because it's easier to conceptualize, but we're all in digital businesses now, but it's the same concepts. Every 10 machines I add to a factory, I have to have a bigger factory. I have more people working in it. I have more risk and I have more complexity as I become bigger. It's just like a bigger system is subject to more complexity and variation. So you can't just keep adding without also reducing your cost, and reducing your cost is what automation is. And I'm going to give this is a technical definition from process science, and this may surprise people. Automation has nothing to do with technology, nothing. Automation is taking the decisions that we make as a business and create solutions that are able to make them at a lower cost. So what I mean by that is if I'm the CEO or if I'm the entrepreneur of a small company and I'm the only person who can make a good decision about my business today, if I'm able to write that down and train an intern to make the same decisions, I've now automated. Because the same decisions that cost my salary as a CEO, if it now costs the salary of an intern and they're able to do it effectively, I've reduced the cost of decision making. And that's all automation is in business. Obviously, if you can automate so well that it's down to a robot who is worth pennies, even versus an intern, that's the end goal of automation. We'd love to use software solutions, artificial intelligence, because you get the most bang for your buck. But you can automate as long as you're creating processes where decisions are cheaper and cheaper to do. So just to summarize, the three, at a technical way, if I'm going to grow, I have to have more customers. If I'm going to scale, I have to be able to build more process capacity. And if I'm going to build more process capacity effectively, I have to be able to automate aspects of those processes so I can build them at a lower cost.
Yeah, that's very well said. I'm sitting here thinking back when you're talking about a business leader that may be the only one in the company that can do a certain thing or this and that, and then documenting that process. I'm going back to within our Me Plus Ultra mastermind group, we do our leadership retreats that are also called Business Bourbon and Cigars, same name as the podcast, right? And early on, especially early on, one of the hardest things we did was getting business owners and business leaders to leave their business and come for a 2 to 3 day event and get out of the store, so to speak. And I used to tell them, because I had grown past that issue. I know that pain. I've got three car dealerships, and I've got the agency in addition to the mastermind group. I'm not involved anymore in the day-to-day decisions and operations of the dealerships or the agency. And the reason for that is because of the documentation and the process improvement steps that I went through. And I try to tell these people, the reason you're saying you can't get to this event is exactly the reason you need to get to this event. because until you're just a prisoner to your, it's not, who wants to have that? I don't want to be a prisoner to any business I have. And without what you're teaching, that's what you are. You're always working in it instead of on it. And the on it produces a lot bigger jumps in growth and profit than anything you can do in it.
Right. And it's the perfect example of what we just were talking about. And this is where people don't think about it that way. It is fundamentally an automation problem. So if you, Scott, are able to step out of your business, it's because you've automated the processes that you were previously the only person who can do. And because you automated that, you were able to create scale. You were able to pass that automation to more people than just Scott. That's how business leaders have to pass knowledge down and then expand it. It's automation, then scaling. And that's what allows the growth.
You know what? It also allows me to do other things.
Yeah.
So how many business owners only do the one thing? So I've just mentioned multiple businesses. They're all in different verticals. And I'm able to do all of them. And by the way, have this work-life balance. Some would probably say, the people. So a lot of my business partners, they'll tell you that my balance is shifts too much to the life part, not the work part. They make fun of me. They call it load man. They say I have operate under load management, like LeBron James in the NBA. So they kid me with that. But that came from years of getting into that. But more importantly, understanding how to delegate and elevate. And you can't delegate and elevate without processes, good processes, and continuous improvement in those areas. You work with a lot of global firms, Silicon Valley clients. What kind of so you touched on in your last answer there, you touched on the scalability and how the problems get bigger. And the more problems exist, the bigger you scale, the more you scale up. So what are some of the common challenges and pain points when it comes to scaling and operating, automating operations?
Sure. The biggest one that the biggest companies on the planet struggle with is just variation in their processes, is to be honest. And really what we're talking about is, well, let's say it's a process improvement mantra, which is variation equals cost. So for instance, if you want to take a process and you want to not provide any standards and let somebody do it how they want to do it every day, and let's say they do it differently, you can run a business that way. It just costs more because you can't plan around somebody doing something differently every day. The customers can't get a rhythm or an experience or relationship with you if the outcome of the experience is different every time. Does it mean that your business will shut down? No, it's just more expensive. And that actually is the biggest problem with company scaling. If you don't provide standard guidelines, if you don't have measures, if you don't have consistency and execution, when you have two people, you can kind of get that in line when you need to. When you have 2,000 people, you can't. The variation is what really goes out of control, and you can't control that variation after a certain scale. And it just ends up costing the company so much more for a variety of reasons. But it's that cost that eats into your bottom line, reduces your profit. And that's what eventually stalls companies and makes them hit a wall where they're either forced to focus on their process or they can grow no further.
Man, you just gave us our trailer for that episode. This episode, that is well said, my friend. Variation equals cost, and then your explanation as to what you mean by that, phenomenal. Let me ask you this question. So now you got all these businesses where they're watching or listening to us, and they're like, I agree with all this, but gosh, I don't have the capacity or the time. How do I start? And let's say you've got different stages. You probably got some people that have nothing documented. You've got some people that document, but they're dated and they weren't kept up to speed, or they weren't constantly being improved. And then you got some people that maybe they got one documented over here, but this team leader doesn't document his, and so on. What is the easiest way for a business leader to, if they want to dive into this, to really tackle it and to where in the end it gets done?
Yeah. Writing it down is always the first step. And that doesn't mean you have to have a fancy tool. You've got to be able to write down your process and confirm that you're seeing it accurately. And it's even more important now that there's so much digitization in our world because you can't see it anymore.
What I'm asking is this. That's one thing. But within a business, you've got multiple processes, right? You've got all kinds of things. So like I'm sitting here, let's say I got hardly anything, or I know it's a mess.
Oh, like where to start in your business.
How do I people talk about like, well, if you're going to eat an elephant, you do it one bite at a time. Right. Yep. So I don't know if it's as simple as that, but like, where do we begin?
Absolutely. No, I understand the question. So the logic is this: your company as a collection of processes, the heart of what creates flow is the customers. So you always start, it's like, if you ask me about where do I start with anything, it's always customer centric. It's always customers first. So if I'm a company of any kind, the first thing you want to do is write down all your products and services that you offer to customers and then apply the 80-20 rule. Always start with the 20% of operations or operating processes that provide the largest share of customer value, or where are the customers actually generating revenue? What's the pull on your company? So let's say, I make widgets A, B, C, and D. Which widget is creating the most profit revenue share for my company? Start with that operating process, map that process out first, and then use that to build the skill set, because that's going to be the most ROI on your efforts, right? Because if I can fix small things in that process, it's creating the most revenue for your business. So you start there as the highest priority and then radiate out in terms of all your processes from there when you can, or you have the ability to do so.
Great suggestion. So, all right. So I'm not asking you to plug this necessarily, but it's going to happen. I mean, I guess it's going to happen. There's no way around it. But I guess what I'm wondering is, because the reason I'm asking this question isn't necessarily to plug you, but it is to make sure that the audience understands the type of impact this can have. So I want you to share like a case study, like a big success story. So the business leaders out there understand like, oh, it's that level of impact.
Yeah. So, I mean, the level of impact we've had, let's just have a generic use case for medium-sized client, and medium-sized client, maybe 100 to 200 employees. The biggest thing that's real for these companies is exactly what you said, which is they're starting to struggle. And the only thing they know how to do is hire more people to just keep the boat together, basically bail water out of the boat before it sinks. I've had projects where in that scale, let's say 200 people, you do good process improvement, and simply by reorganizing the staff, same demand, same cost. So we're not changing anything. We're just reorganizing people and empowering them to sit in different places in the organization and changing their processes. I've seen lifts where instead of now hiring 10 people, you have 25 people idle. You have 25 people who are working 80-hour weeks who can now work 50-hour weeks. That's the kind of power that we're seeing with this type of work. I'm not adding anything to the business. I'm not buying new technology. I'm just reorganizing processes and people, and we're getting kind of lift. People who are working so many hours, they didn't think they could go on anymore, and now they're back to a regular work week. I mean, we're talking 30, 40% productivity shifts. That's the power of process improvement.
That's right. I once had an HR manager. This is a true story. That would brag to me over a couple year period. She was great in terms of like the culture and the morale and stuff like that. She used to brag to me about how many employees we've added during her tenure. And I used to tell her, just so you understand, that doesn't impress me. I was like, I want to get more done with less. And so it alerted me to something, because, I'm not, this is at the tail end of me doing, I was like, first off, I got to look at my operations person. I got to look at because we're throwing people at problems here, and there's no way you cannot tell me that our processes are so perfect and buttoned up that the only solution was adding more people. Because I wasn't seeing people work less or more. I wasn't seeing things be more efficient. I was just seeing higher payroll going out. And so it alerted me two things. I need to change my HR person and I need to change my operations person, which both happen. I, you have to have a certain level. Another thing I loved more than anything when we brought in our process expert, if you're going to map out the process and get real buy-in and the people are involved in improving the process, there's an education that happens that I don't think they get anywhere else, and that's a business education. When we talk about not throwing people at the problem and being more efficient, and you can actually get more done in less time, all these things, and here's how we do it. There's an education that most businesses do not teach their employees, and that has to happen in order for people to get buy-in and understand it at the level you need them to. And so I think there's added benefits that happen when you start to take on a project like this.
Oh, for sure. I actually, most of my successful client engagements, I offer training as a part of it, like you just said, because you can't really internalize a process improvement culture or a process-centric culture unless you understand some of the grander vision of what process work is. Because you can also take this stuff home and impact your life at home personally. It helps with everything. I mean, it's a way of life. Not to sound too much like a cult leader, but I mean, it changes everything. It really makes you more productive in every aspect.
So let's just say this. We want, and by the way, improving process to me is a form of innovation. I can have innovative breakthroughs within my process, but let's take innovation to whether it's like a product or a service we're providing for a second. New innovative product, service, whatever it might be. Sometimes when you bring something new to the market or new within the company, it can blow up or just really have a lot of disruption on a process, which lowers the efficiency and productivity. How do you recommend balancing that?
Sure. So a lot of the time, it's going to be the same recommendation as with everything, which is you can plan to know if you're adding a new disruptive service, you're adding a whole new product line, you're adding a whole new team or department. It's got to still bolt on to your as-is operating model, your as-is organizational structure. So there's no going to be swirling around what I'm going to tell you for everything, which is you've got to understand your current system. If you don't understand where your people are at, are your people working 40 hours or are they working 80 hours? What kind of capacity do they have for change? What kind of capacity do they have to support a new initiative if it starts to go wrong, if there's some unknown? You've got to baseline it. And when you resolution your company to add this new disruptive, this new innovation, as long as you're planning it with enough risk for the unknown, it's just the same sound logic as anything. Building new process is a matter of just iterating your current process. There's no way around it.
All right. So if we got listeners out there, people who are watching, maybe they want to look you up, pick your brain a little bit, whether it's one-on-one, hopefully hire you, or find out more about Truvle, right? What's the easiest way for them to get in touch with you?
Easiest way is sam@truvle.com. That's it. Right. So you can email me directly. I'd love to hear from podcast listeners. If you have any questions about process mapping, anything you need, please reach out. You can also find me on LinkedIn at Sam Drauschak. I'm the only one, Sam Drauschak. If you look it up LinkedIn, I'll pop right up. Feel free to connect with me and also message me on LinkedIn. I'm very accessible. I'm very open because I'm only working 35 hours a week because of my process magic.
I love it. So first off, I love the fact that you've got the only, Sam Drauschak name on LinkedIn. What a benefit that is. Makes it easy to find you.
SEO. Drauschak is a unique last name, so it's helpful.
All right. So there you have it, everyone. That's another enlightening conversation on business, bourbon, and cigars. I want to huge thank you to you, Sam, for sharing your invaluable insights, expertise when it comes to business process optimization. As I said earlier, this is something that touches home with me, so I was excited to have you on the show. I want you to be sure, Sam gave us some good things or ways to reach him, but also I want you to make sure that you reach out to Truvle.com. You can look him up there and look up his company there to learn more about Sam's work and discover how you can scale, automate, and grow your business with efficiency and innovation. So join us next time. Make sure that you share this episode to any business leader. And let me tell you, there's a lot of business leaders out there. I can tell you, I've worked with a lot of them that need this episode, need to hear it and more importantly, start acting on the advice that Sam gave. So share it, recommend us, review us, especially those 5 stars. Those are the ones we appreciate the most. But I will tell you, I pay attention to all of them in hopes to improve the show. So until then, stay tuned, stay inspired, keep striving for excellence. Cheers.